An 18-year-old girl from Alaska disappeared from a coffee shop she worked at. Her phone started getting weird texts, but the police and the FBI couldn't find any evidence. After a massive investigation, they were able to discover the truth, but they could not imagine dealing with one of the worst crimes in history. Samantha Koenig was born on 30 August 1993 in Anchorage, Alaska. This is the largest settlement in the state, characterized by a quiet, measured way of life, a harsh climate, and boundless expanse of belted snowy mountains. The girl loved animals very much, so after school she planned to find a job associated with them. Another option for her was a career as a doctor. Samantha was even considering applying to the Navy as a nurse. She worked part-time at the Subway restaurant and the Harley-Davidson dealership center. In early 2012, when she was 18 years old, she found another job at a small network coffee shop located in the city center. Samantha loved this opportunity. Firstly, the work was quite easy. Secondly, at the shift it had to be alone, so the entire work process depended on her. However, her father did not share this enthusiasm. He was worried that Samantha would have to work late at night and tried to talk her out of it. But ultimately, the father supported the daughter's decision, provided he picked her up after each shift. The girl also assured him that the coffee shop was full of cameras and even had a panic button to call the police. Although the coffee shop was in the center, it was a fairly deserted area, as was most of Anchorage. The city is characterized by low population density, so even in the central area, you can see empty streets. In addition, Alaska has a light day in winter, so Samantha had to work a lot at night. Samantha loved this job and quickly got used to it. By early February, she had been working there for a month. On the first of the day, the girl was preparing to finish her shift as usual. At 8:00 p.m., 5 minutes before the coffee shop closed, a customer came and ordered a large Americano. Samantha made a drink and turned to the window to give it to the buyer. He took a glass and immediately pointed a gun at the girl. An unidentified man wearing a ski mask stated that he was going to rob her and demanded that the light at the coffee shop be turned off. Samantha met his demand and the perp climbed through the window. Everything that happened was on the security cameras, but those silent witnesses couldn't help the girl. Frightened by the armed robber, she also failed to push the panic button. Once inside the coffee shop, the perp tied Samantha up and asked where her car was parked. The girl said she didn't have one and added that her boyfriend would be here any minute. The man then took her outside and headed for his car. As he looked around, Samantha managed to escape and fled, but the criminal quickly caught up with her and grabbed her. Unfortunately, there was not a soul on the street at the time, so no one could help her. The man said if she tried to run again, he'd kill her. He then led the girl across the street to his pickup truck and put her in the passenger seat. The perpetrator had clearly prepared in advance because the registration plates had been removed from the vehicle. While he was taking her to an unknown destination, the man stated that he only wanted a ransom from her family so that Samantha could go home. He still did not show her his face, which was covered with a ski mask. She tried to convince him to let her go and said her family didn't have much money, but the kidnapper wouldn't listen. At some point, he asked Samantha where her phone was. The girl answered that she had left him at the coffee shop, and it pissed off the criminal. He needed the phone to implement the ransom plan. He then returned to the coffee shop with a smartphone and sent 2 messages from it to Samantha's boss and her boyfriend. In them, the kidnapper, on behalf of the girl, wrote that she was tired and would go to the country with friends for a few days. The whole time Samantha was in his pickup. After sending messages, the kidnapper pulled the battery out of the phone and again sat behind the wheel. He drove the girl to an unknown place, like a barn, and told her to sit quietly. The man said that if she tried to scream, he would kill her. He also added that he had a police scanner, and if she managed to call for help, he would know immediately. The perp asked Samantha for her credit card, but it wasn't that simple. The girl said she shared a bank account with her boyfriend, and he had the card. Then the man decided to steal it, having previously found out the address of the guy and the PIN code. He tied Samantha alone and went for the card. The girl said that she always lies in the guy's car. Arriving at the scene, the criminal saw the right car and began to open it. At this very moment, the guy noticed him from the window and hurried to the street. but he was late. The kidnapper pulled out his card and quickly disappeared. On the way back, he stopped by the Atman to check the PIN number and went back to Samantha. Meanwhile, the girl's family and boyfriend were in a panic. The guy never believed for a second that the message was written to her, and everyone knew that something bad had happened to Samantha. But at the time, none of them connected the theft of the credit card to the disappearance of the girl. The guy did not even think that these events could be related. During the night, Samantha's family called the police. They started searching. Of course, the first thing they did was look at the footage from the coffee shop, and they immediately witnessed her abduction. The FBI soon joined in, but they never found any solid leads. The perp was clearly meticulously prepared for the abduction, and there was no detail on the cameras that could identify him. Meanwhile, the girl's relatives raised $41,000 with the help of sympathetic people, which was promised for information about Samantha's whereabouts. The parents constantly gave interviews to local TV channels, begging for any information about the fate of their daughter. Leaflets with photos of Samantha and information about the reward appeared throughout Anchorage, but the police never received a single valuable witness. Days passed and the detectives, desperate, began checking out everyone Samantha knew, including her boyfriend and family, but they quickly established that none of them had anything to do with the kidnapping. It's been almost a month. On February 24, Samantha's boyfriend received a new message from her number saying Horse Park sign under Albert's picture. Isn't she cute? And the investigators immediately realized that this was a local pub. And together with the girl's relatives, they went there. After a while, they saw what the kidnapper meant. In the park was a stand with various leaflets, including a photo of a dead dog named Albert. The owners put this leaf on the stand to say goodbye to their pet, but detectives noticed a plastic bag under it. When they opened it, they saw a photo of Samantha in the background of a February 13 newspaper on Polaroid, as well as a letter written on a typewriter in which the kidnapper demanded to put $30,000 into her bank account. He promised to kill the girl if these conditions were not met. The police and the FBI immediately devised a plan that could help them catch this sophisticated criminal. They told the girl's father to replenish the card balance with parts so that the kidnapper had to repeatedly approach the Atman. That's what he did. The man first deposited $5,000, and a few hours later, the money was withdrawn from an ATM in Anchorage. The kidnapper was caught on the camera, but the detectives were going to fail. The man wore a hat, a hood, glasses, and apparently a fake beard with a mustache. It was impossible to identify him from his photograph. The police immediately arrived at this Atman, but the criminal had already fled. A week later, the kidnapper withdrew another batch of money from Willcox, Arizona, across the United States. He traveled 6,000 kilometers to confuse the investigators, but they continued to monitor his action. The next cash withdrawal took place in Lordberg, New Mexico, just an hour from Arizona. He then withdrew money from various Texas cities twice. Meanwhile, the police had carefully examined the ATSAM photos. They soon realized that the perp had made a huge mistake at Willcox and left his car in the camera's sights. Thanks to this, the detectives now knew the model of his car. Of course, it was impossible to read the license plate in this picture, but now they had something to work with. Investigators feared that the kidnapper might cross the border into Mexico, so all patrols were instructed to stop the white Ford Focus. A few days later, on March 13, a highway patrol from Texas spotted the car of this brand in the hotel parking lot. A man was driving. The officer decided to wait for the car to move and follow it. Soon, the man drove out of the parking lot and headed along the highway. As soon as the driver exceeded the speed limit by 3 miles, the patrol officer ordered him to pull over. This was done to lull the suspect into complacency. If a dangerous criminal is at the wheel, he can be armed and ready to fight to the last. So the patrolman pretended that the reason for the stop was a small violation. White Ford driver was 34-year-old Israel from Anchorage. This immediately alarmed the policeman, and he decided to search his car while calling for reinforcement. Samantha's cell phone and her boyfriend's bank card were found in the car. They also found a gun, a fake mustache, a beard and dark glasses. The police had no doubt that he was behind Samantha's abduction, but they were still shocked, as Israel was never in their sights. The man had a completely clean criminal history. He lived with his girlfriend and 10-year-old daughter, successfully conducted his small construction business. He was respected and trusted among his acquaintances. Even some employees of the Anchorage Public Prosecutor's Office used his services for repairs and construction. But first of all, everyone was worried about one question. Israel was very calm during the interrogations. He was joking and laughing a lot. The FBI agent maintained a dialogue in his style, and after a while he confessed to the crime. He stated that he had planned to rob the coffee shop for several days. He did not know whether she would be kidnapped. What's more, he's worked out 2 rules that he broke. Never look for victims near his own house and never transport them in his car. All this made him doubt standing in front of Samantha in a dark coffee shop. But he made the decision to act until the end. In the evening of the abduction, he took her to a shed in the backyard of his home where his daughter and girlfriend were at the time. The perp turned on the radio in case his victim tries to scream and went to get a bank card. Upon his return, Israel quietly entered the house, trying not to wake his family. He poured himself a glass of wine and went to the barn where he abused Samantha and killed her. But what about the picture they found in the park? It had a February 13 newspaper 2 weeks after the kidnapping, and Samantha seemed alive. She was actually dead the whole time, and there's no manipulation in the photograph. Israel sewed on her eyes to keep them open and put makeup on her face. We cannot show this photo in the video because YouTube will impose a restriction on the demonstration of the deceased. According to the detective who was present at the interrogation, Israel told the details of the murder with such ease as to list the food eaten for breakfast. The perpetrator agreed to tell the story on the condition that the confession part of the interrogation was not published. He didn't want his daughter to hear all this. Meanwhile, he was killing Samantha just a few dozen meters from her bedroom. The detectives had already thought that Israel's story was coming to an end, but that was just the beginning. The morning after the murder, Israel and her family went on a sea cruise from New Orleans. The tickets were bought in advance, and the perpetrator knew full well that he was committing the murder just hours before his departure. Accordingly, he had to leave the body somewhere so that no one would find it. Israel simply left it in the same shed. It was freezing outside, so the body froze quickly. Returning home 2 weeks later, Israel raped the girl again, took a photo with the newspaper and, using a typewriter, wrote a ransom letter. He then separated the body and went to a small lake 40 minutes from Anchorage. With the help of a chainsaw, he made holes in the ice where he placed bags of body parts and extra loads. After all this, the maniac started winter fishing. Police divers spent 10 hours to remove these bags from the bottom. Detectives also learned that during his travels between the Thames, Israel used a rented car, the same white Ford Focus. At some point he had a problem, and he went to one of the dealerships to get his car changed. Surprisingly, this moment played a key role in the capture of the criminal. The car hit the Atom camera before it broke down, and all the cops were looking for this model. At the dealership, he was given the same white Focus, as they had no other suitable cars at the time. If the situation had been different, he would not have been stopped. In the end, during the interrogations, Israel confirmed what the investigators had already guessed. Samantha was not his first victim. The perpetrator promised to tell them all the crimes committed in exchange for 2 conditions. First, he wanted to be guaranteed the death penalty and demanded that it be carried out within a year of being sentenced. Second, he asked me to keep everything he said from the press. These conditions surprised the detectives, but they saw no reason to refuse, and the maniac began to tell them horrible stories. Israel began to commit crimes from an early age. He broke into other people's homes, stole, set fires in the woods, and tortured animals. His parents were deeply religious, but professed very dubious and little popular branches of Christianity. Due to the constant change of religion of his parents, they traveled regularly throughout the country. At the age of 20, he joined the army, where he spent 3 years. A few months earlier, he had attacked a random girl in one of the parks of Oregon. At the interrogation, Israel said that he wanted to leave the army as soon as possible to start killing. At 23, he began his series of murders. he was making weapons caches in the woods so he could go there at any moment and start looking for victims. Police discovered 2 such caches in Anchorage and New York. Inside were money, knives, pistols, and disposal tools. Over the next years, he regularly hunted in various states, but the exact number of victims is still unknown. The FBI has only been able to pinpoint 5 of them, but detectives believe Israel committed at least 11 murders, and these are only cases in which many factors indicate his involvement. In total, the number of murders could be around 30. In addition, Israel carried out robberies of banks, shops, and private homes in order to always have enough money to buy weapons and travel. His caches, discovered after interrogations, contained an impressive supply of cash. Despite all this, the man was never seen by the police except in one case. During these interrogations, he denied involvement, but the detectives did not believe him. On 3 March 1996, a 12-year-old girl named Julie Harris disappeared. Israel, then 16, lived in the same area. Police suspected him after they found a witness who saw Julia near Israel shortly before her disappearance. A year later, the girl's remains were found in the river, but her killer was never caught. During interrogations after Samantha's murder, Israel denied involvement, but investigators were slow to take his word. However, they had no direct evidence. In a conversation with FBI agents, Israel admitted that he had studied serial killers since he was a child, and his idol was Ted Bundy. The maniac wanted to be like him and felt no remorse for his victims, and was happy to tell how he managed to lead 2 completely different lives. On the one hand, he was a decent family man and businessman, and on the other, an inhuman murderer. The only thing that gave any hint of emotion was that Israel had asked detectives to keep details of his crimes from his daughter. He also stated that he had never killed children or those with them, but the FBI agents did not believe him, but could not prove otherwise. As a result, investigators were forced to admit that Israel was a highly sophisticated maniac who had made only one mistake in his series of crimes. The investigators had hoped that he would tell them all his atrocities, but this never happened. 9 months after his arrest, Israel took his life in his cell, despite hundreds of hours of interrogation by FBI agents. He kept a lot of things from them. Under the bed in his cell were found 11 drawings of skull. It is possible that each of them symbolized his victim. Pictures of these drawings were published only in 2020. Thus, Israel can be considered one of the most cruel and thoughtful maniacs. He managed to maintain an impeccable reputation, committing dozens of different crimes, always getting away with it. If he hadn't left his car out of camera view, he might never have been caught. Investigators had no doubt that he would then continue to kill, as he saw murder as the meaning of his life and planned to continue hunting humans until he was caught. Share your opinion in the comments, and do not forget to like under this clip if you liked it. Thanks for watching.